Let me start. When I was asked to come, I was asked to talk to you about two things: the 2018 election, and that by implication means a little bit about 2020, and then the Rules Committee, how it operates, and what it will be doing during this particular time frame. Let me talk quickly about 2018 because it's the predicate for everything that's happening. 2018 was a very interesting election. Despite what everybody wants to say, it's a referendum election. It was a midterm on a Republican president, and the election was more about President Trump than anything else, whether he was on the ballot or not. And we actually went into that election better prepared than I have ever seen a majority to go into what we knew from the very beginning would be a very challenging time. Nobody's had a good midterm since 2002, when President Bush obviously was operating in the shadow of 9/11, extraordinarily popular, and we were able to defy history and pick up 6 congressional seats in that year. This year, in 2018, we knew we were going to have a tough time. And we went into it with, number one, something we didn't have in 06 or 08, honestly, a very good record to run on. We were in a period of relative peace in terms of post 9/11 period and great prosperity. Low unemployment rate, wonderful job growth, finally wages moving up. Republican Congress had been very consequential, not only in partisan things like the tax cut and deregulation, where we did a lot working in concert with the administration, but also, frankly, if you were sort of in a blue district or a purple district, you could run on veterans issues. You could run on the job that we had done in human trafficking. There were a whole series of bipartisan things that had been accomplished, didn't get as much publicity because they weren't as controversial, but they gave you an issue portfolio if you were a Barbara Comstock or something like that. You could actually run on something that could appeal to your district. And we had a great committee. I will tell you, the NRCC was as well prepared as I've ever seen it. Excellent staff. My friend Steve Stivers, I think, did an unbelievable job. And we had a whole series of weapons we had never had before. The Congressional Leadership Fund that Speaker Ryan had set up. Believe me, I've done a lot of elections. We have never had anything that spent millions of dollars like that in quasi-coordination, not legal or illegally, but I mean, you just watch where they buy stuff. You see the polling information they put up, and it's pretty easy to match your steps together. So we went in with, I would argue, a great set of candidates. I mean, the people that we had in the seat and that we lost, the Carlos Carbellos of the world, the Jeff Denhams of the world, the Barbara Comstocks of the world, stop and think about them as members. And they had all won, or many of them had won, in districts that Hillary Clinton had carried. So these were people that were used to winning in places that were tough. I was surprised, quite frankly, we lost as badly as we did. Lost 40 seats. And I think, I thought we would probably lose the majority. I did not think we'd lose 40. I thought we'd lose in the mid to high 20s someplace. And the reason is pretty simple in retrospect. That is the enthusiasm of the Democratic electorate. I remember being at an NRCC retreat, wonderful pollster, and many of you here, of course, know Neil Newhouse, public opinion strategist. I think one of the really great pollsters in the country. And Neil, laid out something. He said, let me talk to you about the good news and the bad news. He said, first, the good news. Your electorate is pretty charged up. And he put some numbers up there. And Republican enthusiasm in 2010, at that point, 65% of our voters were anxious to vote in 2010. In the same point in 2018, 64% of our people were anxious. So we had literally enthusiasm at about what we had when we had the greatest victory that the Republicans have enjoyed since 1938 in 2010. He said, now let me show you the bad news. And he had Democratic enthusiasm numbers. In 2010, 38% of Democrats were anxious to vote in the upcoming election. This year, it was in 2018, it was 74%. And guess what? You go back and look at the numbers. We had the highest off-year turnout since 1912, over a century. And so both sides showed up in unusual numbers. Our side in enough numbers to normally win. I remember talking to my good friend Pete Sessions, who, believe me, I wish were running the Rules Committee right now rather than me, because there's nobody I like better or admire more than Pete, honestly. And we talked after the election. I actually thought, I didn't see how you could beat Pete Sessions. If you've ever been down to his district, in Dallas, he is Mr. Dallas Congressman. Everybody in Dallas knows Pete Sessions. I've watched his district operation, and it's one of the best I'd ever seen. Always these bright, talented, younger people. Amazing. I'd gone down and done a couple of events with him, toured some medical research facilities for him, because that was something we did as chairman at Labor H. Pete doesn't approach anything without the utmost intensity. That's just who he is. So the campaign team, this is not one of these situations where they got, complacent. There's just not a complacent bone in Pete Sessions' body. So the team was a great team, exactly what you'd expect a former chairman of the NRCC to have. The district was a great district, and he lost. And he lost because the turnout there was higher than it had ever been. It broke every record in the book. Same thing beat John Culberson, who actually ran a pretty good race in Houston. Honestly, I won't tell you which one of them said this. We were joking about it afterwards. I said, well, I lost to Ted Cruz because they both ran well ahead of Senator Cruz in their districts. But Beto O'Rourke was a phenomenon candidate. But the real thing was just massive Democratic turnout. And you can see that again and again and again. Now, so anybody that doesn't think that's coming in 2020 isn't paying much attention. And we lost in 2018, I would argue, a really incredible generation of members. In fact, when I was the chairman of the NRCC in 2008, we lost 21 seats that year. I remember, which, by the way, Charlie Cook predicted 28, and everybody else was north of him. So we actually did better than history suggested we should. We actually beat 5 Democratic incumbents that year. I remember somebody after the election said, God, Tom, it must have been tough to lose 21 seats. And I said, it really was, but it wouldn't have been near as tough if I could have picked the 21. And that's the problem with this election. We lost. Look, you're not going to replace a Carlos Carbello. You're not, again, a Jeff Denham, a Barbara Comstock. You go back and look at those members that we lost, and they were great members because they held tough ground. And they held tough ground because they did everything right. So to lose those kind of people was startling. Now, looking ahead to 2020, you would think 2018. Oh my gosh, it's going to be terrible in 2020. I would submit we don't know yet, and I would submit that for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's not going to be a referendum election. It's going to be a choice election. So it's going to be a lot, and not just about Donald Trump. It's going to be about who's on the other side. And as I watch the Democratic field scramble ever further to the left, and I think about campaigning against Medicare for all, the abolition of ICE, wealth tax, 70% tax brackets, I'm thinking, I kind of like that. I think I can make my case pretty well, and I think we could make it, frankly, in a lot of the swing suburbs we lost. I think, again, Karen Handel, who's a wonderful member, that district was a 20+%. Romney district, a 1.5% Trump district. It's one of the 10 most highly educated districts in America, one of the 20 most affluent districts in America. That's ground we can come back and win in the right kind of presidential year against the right kind of opponent. So with 30-odd Trump seats out there, we have a chance. Now, history would tell you it's going to be a challenging election. Look, nobody has lost at a midterm and won the majority back in a presidential year since 1952. And no president has lost the majority at a midterm and won it back in a re-election since 1948, and Harry Truman. So, and that was a period of great volatility as well, the late 40s and early 50s in American politics. So, history doesn't offer you a lot of interesting precedents. Although, again, when I almost said Senator Castle, God, I wish that were true. It should have been. Congressman Castle won in '92. We actually did something pretty unusual at the NRCC. It's the first election in 100 years that a party lost the presidency and picked up seats. We actually plus 10. So you could actually, if you look at where we're at now, look, we lost most of our vulnerable seats. We got a couple out there. If you're John Katko, God bless him, he's holding really tough ground for us. There are a number of people like that, but there aren't only 3 that are sitting in seats that Hillary Clinton won. So we don't have a lot of vulnerable seats. And the environment will be better, and if anything, our energy level will be higher, and I think we will have a target to run against. So I don't put it beyond our ability to retake the majority in 2 years. It'd be very unusual to do it, but it's not impossible to do it. And then one other thing I would add, we actually have the very best person to do that job. Look, if you've been around here very long, you all know Leader McCarthy, and I will just tell you, he's the best fundraiser, he's the best candidate recruiter, and he's the best political strategist we have, and they're all rolled up into one person who happens to have the leadership of the entire party and the ear of the President of the United States. So I think this is going to be an extraordinarily interesting election. Frankly, unlike 2008, where I inherited a committee that was heavily in debt, that was literally broken. There was like 7 staffers left. They were $19 million in debt. I had a treasurer we didn't know at the time who was a crook, who later went to jail because we caught him stealing and turned him in. Steve Stivers left that committee in really good shape. It fought hard, but there's great staff there. There's great continuity there. Tom Emmers brought in a great team. Fundraising's going surprisingly well for having lost the majority. Debt's being paid down, and it was controlled debt. It was line of credit. So, we got the weapon. I think we've got the leader. I think we've got an interesting environment. So I think this next one, we really do have a chance to do something that's very unusual, and that is reclaim a majority during a presidential election, something that Ronald Reagan couldn't do. Not that he had the majority in the House, but he lost 26 in 1982. He got back 14 of them in a 49-state sweep. And we can debate the political merits of the president forever. I will tell you this: he ain't carrying 49 states. We're not going to have that kind of leader at the helm. But we do have one that will rev up our base, and frankly, we have the chance for the Democratic Party to move so far to the left that it will push back a lot of suburban voters that we lost last time, just frankly out of fear. We won that way, honestly, 4 years previously, where Hillary Clinton was just an unacceptable alternative to many, many people. They always like to point out she did win by 3 million votes, which is true, but she carried California by 4 million. So, take California out of the election, she actually lost the country by 1 million votes. And she lost, obviously, some pretty key states, places like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, that the president carried, that none of us, I certainly didn't see that coming. If any of you did, my hat's off to you. You're a much bigger political prognosticator than me. So much for elections. Now rules. I got to tell you, on rules, this is the last place in the world I ever wanted to be in my congressional career, was rules. Somebody asked me when I said, well, I've spent a lot of my career there. I spent my entire second term there, and then when we got the majority back, I get this call from Pete Sessions, who wanted to refashion the Rules Committee, make it not an exclusive committee anymore, but bring on senior members that had expertise in other areas. He wanted a senior appropriator on there. And so he talked me into doing it, and which means Boehner appointed me. And then obviously Paul Ryan wanted that to stay that way, and now I wouldn't be there today if it weren't Leader McCarthy. So this is not my desired place in the world. Matter of fact, when the leader and I talked about this, he said, hey, this was after the approach race. We had a very spirited race, and my good friend, and I got to tell you, great appropriator, Kay Granger, won. I'm glad she did, quite frankly, because now she can deal with it in the minority. She's just great. She is really awesome. Great appropriator and Texas tough. I told the leader, I said, look, I'm not giving up approach to go over rules where I lose every committee vote 9-4, don't get to spend a dime. He said, oh, no, you can have them both, which was a shock. And he said, I want you to do this. I said, well, I've never been there in the minority. And by the way, none of our members that are there now have ever served in the minority on rules. Dreyer did, obviously. Pete Sessions did. The membership in that era did. So this is a new experience for every member on my committee. It's a new experience for every staff member in rules to be there on the minority. It's a younger staff, a lot of turnover there. So there's a lot of learning to do here as well. What do you do in the minority on rules when you know you're going to lose everything? And you do a couple of things. I mean, the first thing is you're the first place where the argument is going to be made about what the Democrats propose. And fortunately, we're going to have a lot to argue against when they finally get their act together. Now, I was actually at a Republican leadership, we have an elected leadership meeting. I sit there courtesy now of the leader because of rules. And he asked me, he said, what's going on in rules? I said, not much. Honestly, they don't have their act together. Look at this week. What are we dealing with? Suspensions and one rule vote on a veterans issue that we passed unanimously in the last Congress, and the Senate didn't get around to doing it. So, we're not fighting anything yet because they aren't doing anything yet. The fight has all been over the government shutdown and funding, and that's pretty easy to make those arguments. But this is a majority that I would argue does not have an agenda. This is not like, we actually ran on an agenda and knew what we would do if we retained the majority. This majority, frankly, even more so than our majority that was created in 2010, just ran against the president. They didn't run on much of anything. I guarantee you, if you want to look at a Democrat from a Trump seat and AOC, they ain't the same people. They can't possibly vote the same way. But the energy in the Democratic caucus is on the left. And you see Speaker Pelosi, in my view, catering to that energy. In the process, if she's not careful, she'll put 30-odd members that she has in a very, very difficult situation. I love, if you're from Oklahoma, we lost a seat there last time. And you look at the new green agenda that's emerging from the Democratic Party. You're from an oil and gas state, bring it on. If that's what you want to vote on, to end all fossil fuels within a decade. And look, we're not against alternatives. We get over a third of Oklahoma's electricity is from wind power. So we are into new types of energy. And have done some actually pretty interesting work on everything from switch biomass type energy as well as traditional oil and gas. But at the end of the day, I sort of doubt that anybody that replaced my good friend Pete Sessions in Dallas or replaced my good friend John Culberson in Houston exactly wants to run on the green agenda in the capital of American oil industry in Houston. I mean, they're going to start spitting out stuff pretty quickly that unites Republicans and divides them. You can't run an election just against Donald Trump. You actually have to be for something. So our job is, again, to lay down that initial argument. The nice thing for us is, and this is where Speaker Pelosi is in a much more difficult position than I think most people recognize. The last time she was Speaker, she had a Democratic Senate. And then 2 years after that, she had a Democratic president. She could put, really, beginning in 2007, almost anything she wanted on a Republican president's desk. She can't do that today. I mean, a lot of this stuff, I was talking to one of my Democratic colleagues on appropriations. We had our first Labor H thing yesterday, and actually made this point. I'm succeeded by Rosa DeLore, and I have a lot of affection and admiration for Chairman DeLore. I really do. We've 4 years in a row on Labor H. We started out always in a different place. And, she's not going to vote for my first bill, but 4 years in a row, after we went through conference and bargained out our differences, she voted for final passage of the Labor H bill every single time. So she's somebody you can deal with in good faith. And I told her that when we had our meeting ahead of the deal. I said, Laura, Rosa, my aim here is to do exactly what you did. That is, I'm going to be against whatever you put out there at first. Because I know what you got to get through to get it across the floor. But once we get in conference with Patty Murray and Roy Blunt, I guarantee you that bill can move to a place I could vote for it. And if Roy Blunt can vote for it, I damn sure can vote for it. And you ain't passing a bill if Roy Blunt can't vote for your bill. So we're going to see a lot of Democratic initiatives that put their people on the hook that then go to conference committee and have no chance of becoming law whatsoever, but have become issues that our members will define themselves on. So that is our number one job. My number one job is to get out of this job and get somebody here that really wants to be the chairman of the Rules Committee so I can go back and be an appropriator. And that's what I intend to spend every waking hour doing. And so it's an interesting committee. I will tell you this on rule. I remember when I first went on, and actually that year, it's my second term, I'm on committees I really love. I'm on armed services, I'm on ed and workforce, I'm on natural resources, so I got Indians with natural resources, I got big university stuff, and ed and labor, I got John Boehner as a chairman, I'm with Duncan Hunter on armed services. My two biggest employers are huge military bases in Oklahoma. And I think this is great. And then I get this call from Hastert, and actually first from Dry, that I needed to come to rules. And and back then it was exclusive, so you could keep your seniority on Hast, but I had to give up the other two. I didn't want to be on rules. Nobody knows what rules does in Oklahoma. Hell, I didn't know what rules did in my second term, really. And so, but I was always raised around, my mother used to say, look, if a speaker of your own party asked you to do something, there's only one answer. It's called yes. So, of course, I agreed. 2 weeks later, I'm at a fundraiser for Tom DeLay's defense fund, writing my check to try and make sure Leader DeLay stays Leader DeLay. And my chief of staff walks up with his telephone in his hand. He said, it's the speaker. I think you're about to get a cup of hemlock. And so I got on the phone, and it's Hastert, and speaker says, Tom, I've been puzzling over the ethics committee, and I think you're a piece of the puzzle. I said, I'm here to Tom DeLay fundraiser. I'll be a big target. I can't do this. I said, no, I need you to do it. And then I quoted my sainted mother. I said, well, my mother used to say, and I said, so the answer, of course, Mr. Speaker, is yes. But I have a question. And he goes, well, what's the question? I said, first rules and now ethics. Just tell me what I did. I'll never, ever do it again. But I learned a lot on rules. And one of the things that David Dreyer taught me was how to use the Rules Committee to leverage power every place else. As a matter of fact, when we were talking about it, I said, well, what can I do on rules? We just voting the party line. He said, well, let me give you an example. He said, Tom Reynolds and Doc Hastings, who were both on the Rules Committee that time, are from the biggest apple growing districts in America, those two. And they want something from the ag chairman, and they were told they weren't going to get it, something to help apples, some sort of deal. And so they came to me, and I just wrote the chairman of the ag committee and said, unless you take care of my two members, your bill will not come through the Rules Committee. Said, problem was solved 48 hours later. They got it. So you can't change the bill, but you can leverage the position into something else. One of the things I'd been trying to do, and my predecessors, Oklahoma actually had the second largest loss of life at Pearl Harbor, sinking of the USS Oklahoma, over 400 sailors. Everybody remembers the Arizona, over 1,200. This was the next big thing. So literally 1,600 of the 2,400 people that lose their lives are on those two capital ships. There's a big, obviously, Arizona memorial, appropriately so. There was no memorial in Pearl Harbor. We had been trying for years to get one. I'd go to these reunions of sailors who were all in their 70s or 80s back then, and they would ring a bell at the beginning of the ceremony for their comrade that had died, and their deal was, we need a memorial. And so I kept thinking, well, I'm on rules. So I went to Duncan Hunter, and I explained my problem. I said, could you put something in the manager's amendment that would require the Navy to give us a spot in Pearl Harbor within 1 year? We'll pay for everything. We'll build a memorial. Don't worry, it's not going to be cost, but we need a site. He did it. We passed the bill. 2 days later, I had 5 admirals in my office telling me how they were always going to do this, and why didn't I just work through channels? So you can do some amazing things. And Mary Lace was kind enough to mention Native American stuff. That's actually something we'll do on rules, because Native American issues are almost never partisan. They really revolve around sovereignty. It's that caucus is effective no matter who's in power if it knows what it's doing. And I guarantee you I can get a lot of stuff done in rules that won't come through the committee, working with Jim McGovern, who has actually got an understanding of these issues and is kind enough. So you figure out how you leverage the position. But job number one is to make the argument to get back in the majority and to set us up with the right arguments to move into conference where once we're there, we're off Nancy Pelosi's turf, and we're in the room with the President of the United States, and more importantly, with the Senate of the United States. And so actually, Senator Blunt and I have already scheduled a meeting. We actually coordinate our efforts, have for 4 years, to literally sit down. This is where we're going to end up. This is what you're going to propose. This is what I'm going to propose. This is where we're going to compromise. And so that will be set up, and we'll frankly work together. You'll see actually across the approach line. I hope my other colleagues are doing the same thing with their subcommittees as well. Let me just end with this, and I'm happy to take questions, or maybe late. This interesting time in the history of the Republican Party. And I grew up really in the Nixon, and I always mention Nixon when you mention Reagan and Bush. I mean, Nixon created the modern Republican coalition in 1972, that Reagan then recreated and reconstituted in 1980. We lost, obviously, because of Watergate. We blew it, but you could see the outlines of a Republican governing coalition as early as 1972 that emerged in 1980, and then in Congress came to full fruition in 1994. We're clearly leaving that era, and we're in something very, very different. And parts of it honestly concern me in terms of where we're headed as a party. But parts of it also tell me that there's something here, just as there was in 1964, and obviously we went through a tough election, but nothing as catastrophic as 64, to remake a Republican coalition. And I actually saw a glimpse of it, I think, on Tuesday night. Donald Trump is the most unorthodox, unusual, unconventional political figure I've ever seen in my life. And so anybody that tries to predict anything about him is almost always wrong. I have been wrong consistently about the president, and he has surprised me both for good and ill on occasion. But I did not go into the chamber Tuesday night expecting to hear a presidential conventional address. And that's what we heard. That was the best speech he has given since he's been president of the United States. It's also the first time I've seen him actually reach beyond his base to try and do what conventional politicians do. He can't win the next election with just his base. He's going to have to bring some other people in. That's going to require a change in style and tone and temperament a little bit. And it's going to call for defining the enemy. And he did both of those things on Tuesday night. He changed his style a little bit. I don't know any Republican who wasn't comfortable defending the president after the State of the Union address. He avoided temptation. In other words, he didn't take the cheap shot. There was no name calling. He didn't go off the script. And he offered compromise. And he also began defining the opposition. That line about the socialism was not an accidental line. It's also one, by the way, that Leader McCarthy uses quite a bit if you listen to him, about redefining where the Democratic Party is. This may not be Ronald Reagan and George Bush's Republican Party, but I guarantee you the Democratic Party isn't Bill Clinton's Democratic Party anymore either. Both have moved in different ways to the edge. I would actually argue the energy in their party is more out there on the edge than our party. So in the next election, we'll have a choice. And that choice needs to not just be at the presidential level, it needs to be defining all the way down. The Democrats have their own fate in their hands. If they nominate somebody that is to the left, that's going to be the campaign. Trump will change it and if the economy is still good, it's a lot to run. When you got a 4% unemployment rate, you just created 300,000 jobs. When you have Chairman Brady here in a couple of weeks, thank him, because he and Paul Ryan laid the groundwork for economic policy, and deregulation and taxation has clearly worked and extended the recovery. So if that can sustain itself, and I'm actually, strangely enough, pretty excited about this president on foreign affairs. I look forward to voting for the NAFTA redo. I hope we get a China deal. I'm proud of the president for what he's doing in Venezuela right now. I'm proud of what he's done. People talk about Russia all the time. Really, I know something about international history. If you're the Russians and you just managed to provoke the United States into its largest military buildup in 15 years, and you've got a Republican president who's cajoled Europe into spending over $30 billion more collectively, which is about half your total defense budget, on its defense, and that number's going up. And if you've managed to get a president who sends lethal aid which the last administration would not do to the Ukraine, a president that enforces sanctions, a president that when he draws a red line in Syria actually enforces the red line. I don't know that that's a real good thing from a Russian standpoint. And if you're a president who has at least gotten the North Koreans, and I don't trust them as far as I could throw them, but they're not shooting missiles over Japan anymore. And they are talking with us, and we are further away from war, not closer to it, than we were when this president took office. He has a lot to run on. If he'll frame it the right way, and if for God's sake, he will just let his team do their job and talk about peace, prosperity, transformation, and define the Democratic Party, he could be a very interesting candidate in the next couple of years. So with that, thanks for having me. It's always fun to come and talk
Yeah. Tom, we elected Congresswoman Carol Miller, West Virginia. How do we increase the number of women coming into the party and get them up to the...
Well, the first thing is listen to, guys shouldn't be deciding this, women should be deciding this. And so, Elise Stefanik, who is really just one of the brightest and the best, is obviously actively engaged in this kind of effort. We did have over 100 female candidates last time. One of the ones that I supported, and I was really disappointed, honestly, I think because it was a missed opportunity, was in the Martha McSally seat, Donna Peterson out there, Hispanic, president of the Chamber of Commerce. She didn't get any help, and she got 46% of the vote. With Martha on the ballot, obviously she didn't win statewide, but that's her congressional seat. She certainly won her congressional seat. I think we had a chance there. So we need to be a little smarter. I think we're a lot more sensitive to it now. And I think we got some people working on it. But, at the end of the day, people have to run, and they have to be able to win primaries mostly on their own. You're not going to get the NRCC heavily involved in primaries. It shouldn't do that. But there are other Republicans that can and will. Elise is obviously stepping up in that way, is building a pact to do that. So I think, recruit the candidates, hope for a better year, and then be willing to fund them. And I remember when, of course, it was a woman-on-woman race in 2008 when Lynn Jenkins was running against Nancy Boyda, who'd taken out Jim Ryan. I mean, if you're in Kansas, Jim Ryan, how's Jim Ryan lose a race in Kansas, the greatest, miler of all time? And yet he did. And a lot of people said, well, you can't beat Boyda. Well, if you met Lynn Jenkins, you knew you could beat anybody with Lynn Jenkins. Because she then beat Ryan in the primary and then rolled over Boyda in a bad year when we lost 21 other seats. So candidate quality is what matters more than gender, but there's plenty of qualified. My mother was winning races in the 1970s in places where no Republicans had ever won. The RNC actually did a survey after she won her first state house race in '78. And that year, 63 new Republican, 63 new women won legislative seats in America. 62 of them were Republican. And so the RNC sort of caught their, what the hell's going on? So they went out and surveyed these places where the women had run. And, there's stereotypes about every party. And, of course, Republicans, they're rich, they're unfeeling, they don't care about people like you. People could think that about a Republican. They had a hard time thinking that about a woman. And if any survey, people will always, when I was in the business, we used to ask the questions. So we did Mary Fallon, we did quite a few female candidates in Oklahoma. And we'd always start out, hey, does gender make any difference in how you vote, roughly? Oh, no, of course not. Okay, between men and women, who's more honest? Oh, women. Between men and women, who works harder? Oh, women. Between men and women, who has more values in common with you? Oh, women. I mean, if you don't think there's not an electoral advantage in favor of women because they are a breath of fresh air and they are breaking the traditional political mold in an era of change, then you're not very smart and you can't read a poll. So we ought to find those kind of people and get them interested in running. And then, again, good candidates will win. And being a woman is only a disadvantage when it comes to fundraising, quite frankly, because so many of them have not been involved in the political fundraising end of the business. That's the problem. But their innate popularity is much better than the three-piece suit white male Republican. You want to start out with a woman if you can, and then make sure you get the money. If they're good, they're going to win.